Welcome to Building Better Relationships with Chuck and Barb Lewis, equipping listeners and viewers with the biblical tools to conquer the difficulties faced in this life. Chuck has practiced crisis intervention since the 1980s and has been in ministry together with his wife Barb for over 20 years. They've taken the countless lessons and the knowledge they've acquired and have put them into this life skills class to share with you. We hope this blesses you.
Well, hello again. I'm Pastor Chuck Lewis, and this is my wife.
I'm Barbara.
And we're so excited to be with you again today on these programs of building better relationships. And what is the topic today?
Today we're going to talk about part of the wedding vow in sickness and in health. And we're going to talk about how that affects our marriage relationship when sickness or accidents or something like that come in to the relationship.
You know, I've been a hospital chaplain for many, many years in this ministry, and I've really seen unfortunate things happen to people, along the way. And when we get married, we never think tragedy is going to occur. But it does with so many people.
Right.
And of course, you don't get married when you're thinking about, when you're getting married, you're not thinking about something like that happening.
Right. We have expectations, and usually those expectations don't include the negative things. We think about the health. We're going to be together in health.
Yeah, and we're going to have a ball, and everything's going to be great, and our life is going to be wonderful. And some people experience that, and
Absolutely.
that's awesome. I mean, God does want us to be blessed, but what do you do when something happens that's unexpected? I know, I went through a car accident years ago, and it was rear-ended by a drunk driver, and boy, everything changed in my life. I mean, we were driving back from a Bible study, and I was sitting in the back seat, and I was kind of sitting in between the bucket seats, talking to the man and wife driving. And
Right.
and if you get my book, you can read more details about that. But all of a sudden, this drunk driver going 60 miles an hour. We were stopped for another accident, and on the road, the highway. And he come barreling in 60 miles an hour and just ran right into the back of us. And if I'd been sitting all the way back in the seat, I wouldn't be telling the story today. But because I'm sitting up there, that saved my life. So anyway, everything changed. I got a severe neck injury from that, spinal cord injury from it, and I ended up in the hospital. And boy, everything turned around for me.
I mean, all of a sudden, you lost your job and you lost your health.
Yes.
Just in a matter of minutes.
Yes, in a matter of minutes, everything changed. And maybe you're experiencing that right now too. Maybe you're laying in the hospital listening to this, thinking the same thing happened to you. And maybe a ski accident, maybe a car accident, whatever. Falling off a ladder. I mean, we talked to a guy one time roofing a house.
Right.
And he fell off the roof and had a spinal cord injury. And things happen, life happens. And sometimes people think God did that to them. But I don't believe God does things like that. I think we don't understand why he allows certain things to happen, but I don't think God pushes anybody off a roof or
no, I don't either.
Causes somebody to be in a car accident.
Right.
But when I was laying in the hospital, I said, Lord, what do you want me to do? And I said, I feel like I'm dying here. I feel like I'm absolutely dying. And I felt like the Lord said to me, go ahead. And I wasn't expecting that at all. And I said, is there anybody else up there? Because I didn't want to hear that. But what he was referring to is dying to the flesh and dying to what was going on in my body and getting my mind back on the Lord. And I was having a pity party for sure, and I was the only one that showed up for it. But God began to say something that changed my life that day. He said, I want you to give what you need. And so I began to give to other patients there in the hospital. And I didn't feel like encouraging them. I didn't feel like saying the things I did to them. But I said the very things that I needed to hear.
And you didn't feel like it, you just did it because God told you to. So
there wasn't
an
anything.
act of obedience. Act of your
Totally,
will.
totally obedience.
Yeah.
Because nothing in my feeling wanted to do it.
Right.
But as I gave to them by the act of my will, God began to give back to me. And Barb, I found that true on everything that I've needed throughout my life.
Yes.
You know, I'm in my 70s now, and all the way through my life, I started when I was in my early 20s in ministry. And the Lord showed me that everything I needed, if I would give, He would give back. And that applied to money, it applied to relationships,
Great.
it applied to everything. Encouragement, self-esteem. I mean, you name it. There's not been one thing that has not worked in, but I didn't feel like giving. And in fact, when I was really tight on money, that was really tough to give money when I didn't have a lot of money. And I know I might have shared this story before. I had a $10 bill left in that's all the money I had in my life. Didn't have any money at home under the mattress, nothing. And the offering was being taken, and I was contemplating whether or not to ask the usher to give me $5 back so I could have lunch that day. And the Lord said, do you trust me? And do you trust me enough to give the full $10? And I was very honest. I said, I kind of trust you, but I didn't totally trust him. I had to work into trusting him. But when the usher put the offering plate in front of me, I was holding the $10, still contemplating whether or not to ask him for $5. And the usher said to me, you have to let go, Chuck. So I dropped the $10 in the offering, and I didn't ask him for $5. And so I thought, well, I guess I'll just fast for lunch, you know.
Yeah.
And so this had never happened before. But before I left that church, a guy walked up to me and shook my hand and had some money in his hand, and he transferred that money to my hand. And he said, God bless you, brother. I appreciate you. And never happened before. I got out in the car and I looked at that money he gave me. It was a $50 bill. I had never even seen a $50 bill at that time. I was 16 years old. And boy, that changed my life forever. And the Lord said to me, if you'll obey me this way, I'll take care of you the rest of your life.
So you planted seed in obedience to what God told you.
Yes.
And you reaped a harvest. So that can really apply into our marriage relationship too, the sowing and reaping in other areas, giving what we need.
Giving what you need. And so getting back to our topic, and I know I kind of went off on a rabbit trail. I kind of known to be doing that, you know, more and more lately. But anyway, yeah, it's like if one of us are injured in our marriage, you know, that's not a license to leave that marriage.
Right. And I think you do need to grieve the loss, though.
Yes.
Because when you get married, you have all kinds of expectations. And if one of you gets a serious illness or an accident, and we did a lot of work at Craig Hospital,
Yes.
which is a spinal cord and head injury hospital in Denver.
Yes.
But we did see those kind of things happen to people. We met some people that 4 months after they got married, her husband was injured.
Yes.
And, you know, that just totally changed their life. So they had to grieve the loss of these future plans. But you know, when something like that happens, it doesn't just happen to the person that was injured. It affects the whole family. or it affects both of you if it's just you and your spouse.
Right.
But what happens to one affects the other.
Sure does.
And it's I think that God gave us the grieving process in order to process those feelings, because you have all kinds of emotions when something like that happens. I mean,
Oh yeah.
we heard of one case where the guy was injured in a skiing accident, and one minute he was perfectly fine, and the next minute he couldn't feel anything
Right.
from his neck down.
Totally.
And, God is still with us in those things.
Yeah.
And I do remember the people that we met still working on the marriage relationship, and so I want you to talk a little bit about the commitment that we make to each other when we get married and how that affects us when something like this happens.
Well, yeah, and I've done a lot of weddings also in the ministry, and most of the time people want in the ceremony, in sickness and in health, till death do us part.
Right.
So otherwise you'd have to say, well, I'm committed as long as you're healthy,
Right.
but not when you're sick. And I know people like you're describing where they've had to take care of their indolent wife or husband, that's what I'm trying to say, for years.
Yeah.
And they were so committed in that relationship, they did it without
Yes.
complaining. It got weary for sure, and they had days where they certainly didn't want to do that, because we're talking about doing everything for that person.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not just, fixing their meal or helping feed them. They've got to bathe them. They've got to do everything. And I won't go into all the details, but you can understand about that. Bodily functions have to be taken care of, and sometimes people don't get to the restroom, and boy, that other person has to clean all that up. It just gets incredibly hard. And you might be watching and say, yeah, I understand, because I'm living that. I do that every day for my wife, for my husband, and it gets weary. I mean, you really, but being committed in the relationship, in marriage, sometimes requires you to do those uncomfortable things.
Right.
And we don't want to. Nobody wants to have to do it. But are you committed only if the person's healthy? And if there's a stroke or something that happens, then you're not committed anymore? Is that your license to just put them in a nursing home and to just get out of the marriage and go marry somebody else or whatever? No, I don't think so. I think it means that you're committed to that person until death do you part. And that doesn't mean homicide. That means till one of you pass away.
Right.
That's true commitment.
Yes. And loss affects I think loss affects who we are. When
Yes.
we go through a grieving process, sometimes we just want things to get back to normal.
Right.
And things may not be the same quote unquote normal that you had before.
Sure.
But it doesn't mean that things can't be good again. And we can choose whether or not we allow the suffering that we're going through to develop good character qualities in us, or to make us bitter and toxic. So, and how we perceive things that are going through depends on how we interpret it. It can be our personality, and whether we're a positive or negative person can affect how we view what just happened to us. Because we met another couple that she was injured in a four-wheeler accident that they had, and what he did was make things at home accessible to her.
Mm-hmm.
He made cabinets that came down to her level, and then they would go back up,
Hmm.
and counters that were low. And so basically, and I do remember her encouraging everybody else at the hospital. So
Right.
we can really get bitter and toxic, or we can work with what we have.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, bitterness says, I'm not going to accommodate you. I didn't cause this accident, so I shouldn't have to remodel our house or
Right.
build a ramp for you or whatever. That's all on you. That's your problem. Well, see, love says what this guy did.
Right.
You know, he completely redid their house to accommodate her,
Right.
which was awesome. See, that's
Yes.
what love in action is all about.
Yeah.
It's not just committed only if it's good.
Right.
It's when it's some unfortunate thing happens as well.
Right. We can still treat each other, excuse me, with kindness and respect. And I remember the people that we met they experienced the injury about 4 months after they got married. They have a good marriage relationship because they can still talk and still have that relationship.
Mhm.
And I think as much as possible, it's good to get help so that you aren't doing everything, to
Yes.
take breaks.
Yeah.
But in Psalm 62:5, it says, "Yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from him." And in Jeremiah 29:11, it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans for good and not for evil, plans for hope and a future." And even when we experience something life-changing like that, God still has a good plan for our lives.
Yes.
And our friends, I think, do some speaking, encouraging other people that have been through similar things that they have. And I remember sometimes when we were at Craig Hospital, they would have someone come speak to the patients that had a spinal cord injury, and they were in a wheelchair, but they had gotten married, they had found a job,
Yeah.
and they just want to give people hope that there's life after
Right.
an accident,
Right.
and that God does still have a good plan for
Yeah.
us.
I remember one guy that I was privileged to lead to the Lord at Craig, and he said, well, now I'm going to be, people call me a holy roller. And he said, I just tell them, no, I'm just rolling holy. And so, attitude has such a big part in this, because what we're encouraging you to do, if tragedy has already happened to
Yes.
you, or maybe that will happen at some point. Hopefully, it never will. But if it has happened, you do it with a committed heart of saying, Lord, help me to have the patience to do what I need to do for my spouse.
Yes.
And I'm committed to them from now on, no matter what. And if it's a bad situation, Lord, give me the grace,
Yes.
to endure what I have to do. But also, we are believers, and we believe in God's healing power.
Yes.
And I think it's powerful for a couple in that situation and I've encouraged people to do this, to always lay hands on the sick, injured person and pray for healing for
Yes.
them. And do it with a heart of compassion.
Yes.
Not a forceful thing, and just really compassionate and believing God for them to be healed. And we've seen God manifest healing. He healed my body from that severe spinal cord injury, and I
Right.
don't have any limitations at all from that today, which is an absolute miracle, because the medical profession said I would have problems the rest of my life from that, organs shutting down and nerves getting pinched and all kind of problems, but I haven't had that because of God.
Right.
So really, you say, well, I don't have faith to pray for somebody. Well, the Bible said faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. So the more Word we get in us, the more faith begins to come alive inside of us, and then we can lay hands on each other with confidence that God will perform His Word. And one thing, Barb, that I've learned to do is, and I'm still doing it, practicing it, is I'm giving up the when.
The when.
To God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, God, I'm not going to tell you when to do it because we want everything instantly, like a microwave oven.
Right.
We just have to give up that right to say it's not when, it's going to happen. I believe in Jesus' name, in your timing.
Yes.
And I give you the timing.
So continue to speak the word over each other and continue to be in faith.
Believe for healing.
Don't throw away your confession of faith.
Right.
And continue to believe God for that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, that kind of patience, I believe, is supernatural.
Yes.
To do it day in and day out, and these people we've referred to that have to do it every single day. They have to take care of the other person, do everything for them, feed them, dress them, take them to the bathroom. Every single thing they need, they have to do. And I'll tell you what, it's supernatural that they're able to do that. And I pray for the people that I know that have to do that on a regular basis.
So God gives us the grace that we need.
Yeah.
For whatever He's called us to
do.
Well,
that's what I pray for. Lord, keep giving them the grace that they need to do that, because naturally speaking, it's impossible. But it's not impossible with God. Right. Well, we could go on and on and on about this. There's so much details about this topic, but our time is gone today. But if you're in that situation, let us know how we can pray for you, and we will do that. And God bless you today. It's been great being with you, and we will look forward to seeing you next time.
If you are blessed by this ministry, please subscribe, like, and share. You can also make donations at chucklewisministries.com. Join us to keep uncovering the tools to build better relationships together. Let's do this again next week.